Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, the new central-focused Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And I would like to first talk about our friend, ex-friend, Manchin and the Voting Rights Act. I think it's really interesting that I never thought he was the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree. I never did. But he could have been a rock star. And I believe he just blew it.
Yeah, when the Democrats' voting rights bill came to the Senate, Manchin caved, went with his fellow Democrats. Fortunately, the vote split 50-50, and they needed 60 votes to move it to a vote. So it is essentially dead. And
did he screw up his career, though?
I don't know that he did.
West Virginia is very conservative. I think he voted for impeachment. Now, the second impeachment vote, anyone could make a case for that one. The first one was ridiculous. He voted for both. I think the guy's full of shit. I think he knows how to play. He knows how to play his constituency like a cheap violin. And I'm not so sure he's open for a confrontation in the when he comes up for in 5 years.
Well, again, I don't know that he actually did any harm to his career. I think he can hold his seat easily.
I'm not so sure. West Virginia is conservative. He consistently plays both sides of the fence. His election ads are all of him with an AK-47 talking about how he's, Rambo reincarnated. And then every time he votes, he's with Nancy Pelosi. I don't buy it, and I don't think his constituency is going to buy it. Is he going to be dethroned? Who knows? I think he's going to have a tough election. And I think the Republicans are going to target him.
Well, the Republicans are obviously going to target him. But honestly, he is standing up with his constituents. Does he have a big career on the national stage? Probably not. But his constituents love him. And in West Virginia, the Democrats are having a hard time because the local Democrats issued an ultimatum to the state Democratic Party that they have to stop going along with what's going on with the National Democratic Party.
And that's why I think he's out of step. No, that's why I think he's out of step, because
that's why he's safe, because the local Democrats are blaming the state party and they're blaming the national party. They're not blaming him.
We'll see how that works out. But interesting. I thought he was going to be a hero. I've heard it from other people besides you, just friends, acquaintances, that he could have positioned himself to be a real power broker. But because he's dumber than a light bulb and because he has no chutzpah, he caved like a cheap suit, and enough with him. More interestingly, a movie I saw when I was in high school, dating myself, but it happens, Dr. Lopkin. A Bridge Too Far, a term and a good movie. It came out at the wrong time. I believe, and it's not just me, but many analysts are saying the Democrats, not only, maybe a couple bridges too far. They thought people were in love with them, but it was more of an anti-Trump vote, and now they may have their heads handed to them in the midterms. Dr. Lopkin?
Well, they're definitely going to have their heads handed to them. I mean, you have historical precedent that...
Yeah, but this is historical on steroids.
But that's the base. The base starts with, the incumbent party always loses the midterm elections, regardless of which 100%. Party. So it starts there. Then you have the radical left aggravating the base of the party. So you have, and I don't know if you've heard this or not, but many politicians are now referring to the squad as the Hamas Caucus.
Oh yeah, no.
Yep.
And any moderate Democrat, it's off the hook. And again, we've talked about both of us being Jewish. You would be perplexed of any Jew voting for a Democrat. I'm sorry. You're voting for your own demise. And people like Blumenthal, I almost called his office. And I don't usually get outraged, but he's on every little thing. They could have, Siamese cats bill, and he'd be in front of the cameras. Where is he to be heard?
Nowhere. He has said nothing about. He has said nothing about the anti-Semitic comments by his own party members. So yeah, but that's not even half of it, because yes, the anti-Semitism is going rampant, and that's going to cost them some votes. Not all of them, because people have a habit of voting against their own interest, but that's chipping away. But now take a look at what's going on in New York City. Okay. The Democrats have been the far left Democrats have been pushing for defund the police. Let's remove the police. And in New York, they did it. Now, New York City is as liberal as they come. And yesterday was the mayoral primary. And guess what? The Democrats had a huge field of candidates, and the top 4 candidates who were running away with the vote all stood up and said, we need to restore the police. And they're the ones that people were voting for. So as the crime wave goes on, and you see this all over the country, crime is going up and up, especially in Democratic-led cities where they defunded the police. Gee, who could have seen that coming?
Well, isn't it I've never thought it would happen again, and you're maybe a little too young for this. It's really the 1970s reincarnated.
Oh,
when you looked at shows, even shows like Barney Miller, whatever, and everything was, they were making fun of how everything drilled down into, no power, no police, the whole society. And I never thought it would happen. I thought we were beyond that, but I'm not so sure we are. I think it's Jimmy Carter deja vu all over again.
It absolutely is. I mean, New York City is falling apart.
Just like the 1970s.
Yes. And now I grew up in New York City in the 1970s. So
Abraham Bean, I think his name was.
Abe Beam. And, I remember what it was like. And the big topic, they always talked about white flight. Anybody who could afford to leave New York was. And based on what we've seen in the census, based on what we've seen in transit trends, we are seeing it again. People are fleeing these liberal cities, San Francisco, New York, California as a whole. The only really liberal country. Yeah, the only really liberal spot that has not seen people flee over the last year and a half was Connecticut, and that's because they got the people fleeing from New York.
Let me ask you a question. He's now not on the air on terrestrial radio, just like us, for the same reasons, by the way. Dr. Michael Savage, he had a book called Is Liberalism a Mental Disorder? And you have to question it, because a mental disorder would be self-destructive behavior, drugs, alcohol, you eventually do yourself in. Is that so far of a reach that in every liberal state, they destroy themselves? San Francisco, my God, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, not America, in the world. New York City, after Giuliani, tourists flock to it. I mean, California, they basically infect everything they do, like Don Bongino said. Everywhere liberalism is, it sets fire to itself. The definition of mental illness, really.
Well, it's, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's what liberals have been doing. They have these ideas, and those ideas don't translate into the real world because they don't take into account human nature. They don't take into account what people actually need, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, I can argue this on an intellectual level as well as they can. But when you come down to the actual results, it's because they don't understand how systems work. And I will give you Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon as the perfect examples. They said, oh, well, what we need is people need more money so they can live better. So let's raise the minimum wage, because they think wages just come from magic. And what happened was you had a massive number of small businesses going out of business. You had people being laid off because the businesses couldn't afford to have that many people at the higher wage. So net, you saw people have less money. You had some people making more because they made the higher minimum wage, but a much larger group made nothing because they were laid off or the businesses went out, and they don't understand how these systems work. Most liberals have never run a business on their own.
No, but that's your greatest point, Dr. Lopkin, and I was waiting for that. Because they all grew up, either they had trust funds or they grew up in academia. They've never, it's the simplest, even though they have, and I love your commentaries about higher education. They go to these highfalutin schools, but they've never worked a day in their lives. And by the way, I teach at Southern Connecticut State University. I would hire some of those kids any day over some Harvard graduate who never pumped gas. But that's another story.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
But it's more than just, being in academia, or if you take a look at the bulk of these people, politics was their career. And
Agreed.
In a lot of cases,
like Gavin Newsom.
Right. And in a lot of cases, it's even a family business. So
like Gavin Newsom. He's related to Pelosi.
Yeah, they've never left that echo chamber, so they never see what's actually going on in America. And if you take a look, liberalism is very localized. You've got the East Coast, you've got the West Coast, you've got the Chicago area. But when you go past Pittsburgh, when you go west of Pittsburgh, when you come east of Nevada, that's a whole area where you don't see a lot of liberalism. And that's a lot of people for liberals to be ignoring.
Oh, no, that's why Hillary lost the election. That's why let's face it, the Republicans lost the last election because of Trump. Trump did it to himself. He deserved everything he got.
There was an anti-Trump movement. People came and voted against him, not for Biden.
Agreed. So I think it is very interesting, Dr. Lopkin, the whole concept of a bridge too far, because that's really where we are. And I really believe one of the biggest early defeats of the Democratic Party was Kamala and her border assignment. I think that sent them reeling. Yeah, because even liberals said she got her head handed to her.
Yeah, she could not handle the press on that, and they were lobbing her softballs, and she still couldn't handle it. She was not ready for prime time. She should never have been chosen as vice president.
Why was she, though? I mean, that's an interesting...
Honestly,
Lopkin
because the left did not like Biden. the Democratic National Committee knew they had to have somebody who could at least appeal to centrists as the president in order to win. But they also needed to appease the wackos on the left to make sure they didn't stay home. Because if they,
like they did yes.
Right, like they did for Hillary Clinton, they stayed home and Trump won. Democratic National Committee knew if the left stayed home, Trump would win again. So they stuck Harris on the ticket as the best of a bad lot, and now it's coming back to bite them. And they know it's coming back to bite them because the head Democrats, Schumer, has stated they need to get anything in their agenda passed as soon as possible because they know they're losing in the midterm elections. They have come out and publicly said they thought they were going to do better in 2020 than they did, which just shows that no, their platform is not popular. It was just Trump was less popular.
I would agree 100%. I think that is really it. I think for the Republicans, last little bit here, your last comment, I believe Republicans like DeSantis and others have an amazingly bright future as long as Trump gets out of the way. Sometimes you just got to know when it's your time and it's his time.
As I don't think Trump is actually going to get involved in the next presidential election.
I hope not.
In fact, he has actually talked about the idea of running for Congress from Florida.
Great.
Which he could win very easily.
I think that's fantastic and have a platform.
That's going to, yes, he'll have the platform if he does that, but it'll also keep him busy enough that he won't be able to screw up the presidential election.
Great. Dr. Lopkin, great addition of Carnivore Bites. I like the new platform. Your thoughts on that?
It's working well. It's working well. People can listen to us on demand, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners. Take care.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.